Welcome to Ironwad Whispers, your corner for stories that hit the heart and spark the imagination. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? Share your city or country down in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you're ready for a journey filled with twists, turns, and emotions that'll keep you hooked till the very end, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. An arrogant billionaire CEO once mocked a humble waitress, never imagining that years later she would rise to become his boss after making one shocking move that changed everything. The August heat in Houston was suffocating even at 9 in the evening, but inside Rosie's diner, the air conditioning kept the temperature bearable. Alex Cross, CEO of Cross Energy Industries and one of Texas's youngest oil billionaires at 35, strutted through the glass doors with his usual arrogance. His custom Italian suit cost more than most people made in 3 months, and his Patek Philippe watch caught the fluorescent lights as he surveyed the modest establishment with obvious disdain. He was only here because his driver had taken a wrong turn, and his phone was dead. Otherwise, he'd never set foot in such a place. Margaret Williams approached his booth with a warm smile, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, order pad in hand. At 24, she was working double shifts to pay for her petroleum engineering degree at the University of Houston, though her uniform gave no hint of her ambitions. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Rosie's. What can I get you started with tonight?" Alex looked her up and down with undisguised contempt. "Coffee, black. And make sure the cup is actually clean this time," he said, though it was his first visit. "People like you probably don't understand the importance of hygiene in food service." Margaret maintained her professional smile despite the insult, pouring his coffee with steady hands. "Will you be having dinner as well, sir?" Alex laughed, a sharp sound that drew attention from other diners. "Dinner? In this place? I'd rather eat crude oil straight from the wellhead. Tell me, sweetheart, what's it like knowing this is your peak, serving coffee to people who actually matter?" "Everyone matters, sir," Margaret replied evenly, though her jaw tightened slightly. "We all contribute to society in different ways." Alex's smirk widened. "How philosophical for a waitress." "Did you pick that up from a motivational poster in the break room? Let me educate you about the real world. Some people create empires and change industries. Others pour coffee. The universe doesn't see us as equals, no matter what fairy tales you tell yourself." As Margaret refilled his coffee, Alex continued his verbal assault, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "You know, I made my first million before I turned 25. By 30, I controlled half the fracking operations in the Permian Basin. What have you accomplished? Mastering the art of refilling ketchup bottles." Several customers shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Margaret set down the coffee pot carefully. "Sir, I understand you may have had a difficult day, but there's no need for rudeness. I'm simply doing my job." Alex pulled out his phone, which had somehow powered back on, and started recording. "This is perfect. My investors will love this. A real American waitress, defending her dead-end job with dignity. It's almost poetic, how some people cling to meaningless work." When Margaret brought the check, a modest $3.50 for the coffee, Alex made a show of pulling out his platinum card. "Oh, wait," he said with mock surprise. "I forgot this place probably doesn't even have a card reader from this century. Do you take payment in food stamps?" The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He threw a $100 bill on the table. "Keep the change. Consider it charity. Maybe you can use it to buy a book about ambition, though I doubt you'd understand it." As he stood to leave, he looked back at Margaret one more time. "In 5 years, I'll own half of Texas's energy sector. In 5 years, you'll still be here, pouring coffee for people like me. Remember this moment when you're wondering where your life went wrong." Unknown to Alex, Margaret's friend Nina had been sitting in the corner booth, recording the entire interaction on her phone. "That bastard," Nina whispered, as Alex's Bentley pulled away from the diner. "Margaret, we should post this. People should know what Alex Cross is really like." Margaret shook her head, picking up the $100 bill with trembling fingers. "No, Nina. He's not worth it. Besides, I have bigger plans than viral videos." She folded the bill carefully and put it in her pocket. "But I want you to keep that recording. Something tells me we might need it someday." That night, Margaret went home to her tiny apartment and pulled out her textbooks, studying until dawn. If Alex Cross thought she was nobody, she would prove him wrong, not with words but with actions. Margaret threw herself into her studies with renewed intensity. Every insult Alex had hurled became fuel for her determination. She graduated summa cum laude 18 months later, with a dual degree in petroleum engineering and business administration. Her thesis on innovative extraction technologies in depleted oil fields caught the attention of several industry leaders, including Elena Vasquez, CEO of Apex Energy Partners, one of the most aggressive private equity firms in the energy sector. "Your thesis is brilliant," Elena told Margaret during their first meeting. "But what really interests me is your unconventional background. You've worked in service, you understand real people. That's rare in our industry." Margaret didn't mention the incident with Alex Cross, but she did speak passionately about democratizing energy wealth and ensuring that the benefits of oil extraction reached working-class communities. Elena hired her on the spot. At Apex Energy Partners, Margaret's combination of technical knowledge and interpersonal skills made her invaluable. She could speak to roughnecks in the field in the morning and present to board members in the afternoon. Her first major success came when she identified an overlooked oil field in West Texas that everyone thought was exhausted. Using new extraction technology she'd helped develop, the field yielded an additional 40 million barrels. Within 3 years, Margaret had become Apex's youngest vice president of acquisitions. She was quietly building a reputation as someone who could see value where others saw waste, who could turn failing operations into gold mines. All the while, she kept tabs on cross-energy industries, watching as Alex expanded aggressively, taking on massive debt to fund new fracking operations. In 2019, oil prices began to fluctuate wildly. Alex, supremely confident in his ability to predict markets, had leveraged cross-energy industries to dangerous levels, betting on consistently high prices. He was wrong. As prices dropped, his company's debt became unsustainable. He needed a massive cash infusion or risk losing everything. Margaret watched from her office at Apex as cross-energy's stock price plummeted. "He's vulnerable," she told Elena during their weekly strategy meeting. "Cross-energy has excellent assets, but Alex Cross has mismanaged them terribly. With the right approach, we could acquire the company for a fraction of its true value." Elena leaned back in her chair, studying her protégé. "You have something personal against Alex Cross." Margaret's smile was enigmatic. "Let's just say I have unique insights into his character that inform my business judgment." Margaret spent months preparing her acquisition strategy. She identified every weakness in cross-energy's structure, every bad decision Alex had made, every contract that could be challenged. She also quietly began buying shares through various shell companies, keeping her involvement hidden. The plan was complex but elegant: use cross-energy's own debt against it. "We'll offer to buy their debt from the banks at a premium," Margaret explained to Apex's board. "Once we control the debt, we control the company. Alex Cross will have 2 choices: accept our buyout offer or face bankruptcy." The board was impressed by her thoroughness. What they didn't know was that Margaret had been planning this for years, ever since that night in the diner. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Alex was in his Houston office, desperately trying to negotiate with creditors, when his assistant announced that Apex Energy Partners wanted to discuss a potential investment. He straightened his tie, seeing a lifeline. "Send them in," he barked. not bothering to look up from his computer. When the door opened, Margaret walked in, now impeccably dressed in a designer suit that rivaled his own, followed by a team of lawyers and analysts. Alex's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. "Mr. Cross," Margaret said smoothly. "I'm Margaret Williams, Vice President of Acquisitions at Apex. We're here to discuss the future of cross-energy industries." It took Alex a full minute to place her, and when he did, the blood drained from his face. The waitress from that diner 5 years ago. The nobody he'd humiliated for sport. She was sitting across from him as an equal. No, as someone who held his future in her hands. "You," he breathed, his usual composure cracking. "Me?" Margaret confirmed with a professional smile. "Now, shall we discuss business? Your company is hemorrhaging money. You're over-leveraged by approximately $3 billion. Your latest fracking project in the Permian has failed to meet projections. You have 90 days before your primary lenders call in their loans. Did I miss anything?" Her tone was pleasant, almost kind, but her eyes held a steel that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Alex struggled to regain his composure. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice rough. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a detailed proposal. "Apex is willing to acquire cross-energy industries. We'll assume your debts, keep your employees, and maintain operations. You'll receive a reasonable settlement, enough to live comfortably, though not quite at your current level." "And what about me?" Alex asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Margaret's smile widened slightly. "You'll step down as CEO immediately. The board will be restructured. Your voting shares will be converted to non-voting stock. Essentially, Mr. Cross, you'll have no say in the company you built." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer bankruptcy. I hear personal bankruptcy can be quite humbling for someone of your stature." "This is revenge," Alex spat, his face flushing red. "You're destroying me because of one conversation 5 years ago." Margaret shook her head calmly. "This is business, Mr. Cross. Your company is failing because of your arrogance, your refusal to listen to advisors, your belief that you're smarter than everyone else. I'm simply offering you a way out that preserves some dignity." "I'll fight this," Alex threatened. "I have connections, lawyers, politicians who owe me favors." Margaret pulled out her phone and played a recording, his voice from that night in the diner, cruel and mocking. "This has already been shared with several media outlets, held pending my instruction. Do you really want to fight this publicly? Do you want your investors to hear how you treat people you consider beneath you?" As the reality of his situation sank in, Alex slumped in his chair. "How?" he asked weakly. "How did a waitress become this?" Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt. "I was never just a waitress, Mr. Cross. I was a petroleum engineering student working to pay for school. But you couldn't see past the uniform. You couldn't imagine that someone serving you coffee might be smarter than you." She moved to the window, looking out at the Houston skyline. "While you were making reckless bets on oil prices, I was studying market patterns. While you were alienating your employees with your arrogance, I was building relationships. While you were mocking people you deemed beneath you, I was learning from everyone I met. The difference between us isn't talent or ambition. It's respect for others." Margaret turned back to face him. "You have 48 hours to decide. Accept our offer, or we proceed with buying your debt from the banks. Either way, cross-energy industries will belong to Apex by month's end." She gathered her team and headed for the door, pausing at the threshold. "Oh, and Mr. Cross, that $100 you threw at me 5 years ago, I invested it. It's worth about $8,000 now. I'll be donating it to a scholarship fund for service workers pursuing higher education. In your name, of course." After she left, Alex sat alone in his office, staring at the proposal. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed relationships for, was crumbling. The irony wasn't lost on him. brought down by someone he'd dismissed as worthless. His phone rang constantly. Investors, board members, reporters who'd somehow caught wind of the story. He ignored them all, for the first time in his life, not knowing what to say. That night, Alex hired a private investigator to look into Margaret's rise. What he discovered astonished him. She hadn't just gotten lucky. She'd been brilliant. Her academic record was flawless. Her work at Apex had generated hundreds of millions in profit. She'd published papers on extraction technology that were being implemented industry-wide. She was, by every metric, exceptional. The investigator also uncovered something else. Margaret had been quietly helping other service workers pursue education, using her own money to create an informal scholarship program. She'd mentored dozens of young people from working-class backgrounds, helping them navigate the corporate world. She'd built a network of loyalty and respect that Alex, with all his money and power, had never achieved. The next morning, Alex faced his board of directors. The 12 men and women who'd once hung on his every word now looked at him with barely concealed frustration. "Is it true?" asked Harold Morrison, the lead independent director. "Is Apex really offering to buy us out?" Alex nodded stiffly. "They're trying to steal the company for a fraction of its worth." "What worth?" snapped Patricia Chen, the longest-serving board member. "Our stock has lost 80% of its value. We're facing bankruptcy. And now there are videos circulating of you insulting a woman who's become one of the industry's rising stars. You've become a liability, Alex." The board voted unanimously to pursue negotiations with Apex, with or without Alex's cooperation. That night, Alex found himself driving through Houston aimlessly, eventually ending up at Rosie's diner. It looked exactly the same. Worn vinyl booths, flickering neon sign, the smell of coffee and grease. He sat in the same booth where he'd humiliated Margaret, ordering coffee from a young waitress who looked tired but maintained a genuine smile. As he sat there, he remembered his own origins. Not wealthy, but middle class, with parents who'd mortgaged everything to send him to college. When had he become the kind of person who looked down on others? When had success transformed from a goal into an identity that required him to diminish others? The coffee tasted bitter, but not from the brew. At midnight, Alex called Margaret directly. "Why didn't you destroy me 5 years ago?" he asked without preamble. "You had the recording. You could have ruined me then." There was a pause before Margaret answered. "Because I didn't want revenge, Mr. Cross. I wanted success. Destroying you then would have made me a viral sensation for a week. Building my own empire and buying your company. That's a legacy." "But you are destroying me now," Alex pointed out. Margaret's voice softened slightly. "No, I'm offering you a second chance. You could have faced bankruptcy, lost everything, been publicly humiliated. Instead, you'll walk away with enough money to start over. That's more mercy than you showed me." The line went quiet before she added, "The offer stands until tomorrow at noon. I hope you make the right choice." The next morning, Alex signed the papers. As he did, he looked at Margaret across the conference table. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. For that night. For the things I said. For the person I was—" Margaret studied him for a long moment. "Apologies are just words, Mr. Cross. What matters is what you do next, as the lawyers finalize the details." Margaret pulled him aside. "I'm keeping you on as a consultant," she said, surprising him. "Not in a leadership role, but to help with the transition. You built this company, you know its operations better than anyone. But you'll report to me, and you'll treat every employee with respect. Consider it part of your education." Alex nodded, understanding that this was both punishment and opportunity. Margaret's first day as CEO of the newly acquired Cross Energy Industries was carefully orchestrated. She gathered all employees in the company's auditorium, from executives to janitors. "This company has incredible assets," she began, "but its greatest resource has always been you, the people who make it run. For too long, that resource has been undervalued. She announced immediate changes, profit sharing for all employees, educational assistance programs, and a commitment to promoting from within. The janitor who cleaned the executive offices would have the same opportunity for advancement as any MBA graduate, provided they showed aptitude and dedication. The response was electric. Employees who'd worked in fear for years suddenly felt hope. Alex's new reality hit hard when he reported to Margaret's office, formerly his office, for his first day as a consultant. She'd redecorated, removing the ostentatious displays of wealth and replacing them with photos of oil workers, charts showing employee satisfaction scores, and a small framed dollar bill, the same $100 he'd thrown at her. "Your first assignment," Margaret said, handing him a folder, "is to spend a week on our drilling platforms. Not in the executive quarters, with the regular crew. You'll work their shifts, eat their food, understand their challenges. Then you'll report back, with recommendations for improving their working conditions." Alex started to protest, then stopped. This was his penance, and perhaps his education. The offshore platform in the Gulf of Mexico was a world away from Alex's air-conditioned offices. He was assigned to a crew of roughnecks who knew exactly who he was. The former CEO who'd cut their benefits and extended their shifts to maximize profits. At first, they treated him with cold hostility, but as he struggled through the physically demanding work, some began to show him grudging respect. "You're not what I expected," said Tommy Martinez, a driller who'd worked for Cross Energy for 15 years. "Figured you'd quit after the first day." Alex, nursing blisters and aching muscles, managed a tired smile. "5 years ago, I would have. I'm trying to be different now." Tommy studied him carefully. "Margaret Williams says everyone deserves a second chance. We'll see if you deserve yours." Working on the platform taught Alex things no MBA program ever could. He learned that the inefficiencies he'd always complained about were actually safety measures that kept workers alive. He discovered that the people he'd dismissed as unskilled labor possessed expertise that took years to develop. Most importantly, he realized that every decision he'd made in his ivory tower had real consequences for real people. One night, after a particularly dangerous near miss on the rig, Alex found himself in the mess hall with the crew, listening to their stories. These men had families, dreams, fears. They were fully realized humans, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. "I was an ass," he admitted to the group. Several laughed. "Yeah, you were," Tommy agreed. "Question is, what are you going to do about it now?" Alex's report to Margaret was unlike anything he'd ever written as CEO. Instead of focusing solely on numbers and efficiency, he detailed the human cost of aggressive profit maximization. He recommended significant safety improvements, better rotation schedules, and investment in worker training. The cost would be substantial, but he argued it would pay off in reduced turnover and increased productivity. Margaret read it carefully, then looked up at him. "This is good work, Alex. You're starting to understand that business isn't just about extraction. It's about sustainability, both of resources and people." She approved most of his recommendations immediately. "Your next assignment is to visit our community outreach programs in the towns where we operate. You'll see the impact of our industry on local populations." Alex spent the next month traveling through small Texas towns where Cross Energy, now Apex Cross Energy, operated. In Odessa, he met families whose water had been contaminated by improper fracking procedures he'd approved to save money. In Midland, he saw schools struggling with funding, while oil companies extracted billions in wealth from beneath their feet. But he also saw Margaret's new initiatives in action: job training programs for locals, environmental restoration projects, profit-sharing agreements with municipalities. In one town, he met Maria Santos, a former housekeeper whose daughter was now studying petroleum engineering thanks to an Apex scholarship. "Margaret Williams remembers where she came from," Maria said. "She doesn't forget that success should lift everyone, not just a few 6 months into his new role." Alex was a different man. He'd lost weight from physical work, his expensive suits replaced by practical clothes. More importantly, his perspective had fundamentally shifted. In a meeting with Margaret and the board, He presented a radical restructuring plan that would make Apex Cross Energy the most worker-friendly oil company in Texas. "It'll cost us short-term profits," he admitted, "but it'll make us sustainable for decades. Happy workers are productive workers. Communities that benefit from our presence won't fight our operations." Environmental responsibility isn't just ethical. It's economically smart. The board was skeptical, but Margaret backed him. "Alex has learned what I've always known," she said. "True success isn't measured just in dollars, but in the positive impact we have on the world." The transformation of Alex Cross became a media sensation. The same man who'd been vilified for his arrogance was now being praised for his humility and growth. In an interview with the Houston Chronicle, he spoke candidly about his journey. "Margaret Williams taught me that leadership isn't about being above others. It's about lifting others up. I spent years building walls. Now I'm trying to build bridges." The interview went viral. But what really caught attention was a photo that accompanied it. Alex and Margaret on an oil platform, both in hard hats and work clothes, surrounded by smiling workers. The woman he'd once mocked as worthless had become his mentor, and he'd become her most dedicated student. Under Margaret's leadership, and with Alex's reformed perspective, Apex Cross Energy began pioneering new extraction technologies that were both more efficient and more environmentally friendly. They developed a revolutionary water recycling system for fracking that reduced freshwater usage by 70%. The innovation came from a suggestion by a field worker who'd been afraid to speak up during Alex's tenure. "This is what happens when you listen to everyone, not just executives," Margaret told the industry conference where they unveiled the technology. "Innovation comes from unexpected places when you create an environment where every voice matters." She publicly credited Alex with championing the worker suggestion program, though everyone knew the real credit belonged to her leadership philosophy. One evening, Alex found himself back at Rosie's diner, this time by choice. He'd become a regular, getting to know the staff, learning their stories. The waitress who served him, Linda, was working her way through nursing school. "Margaret Williams set up a fund," Linda told him. "Helps service workers get education. Changed my life." Alex realized that Margaret hadn't just built a business empire. She'd created a movement. While he'd focused on taking, she'd focused on giving. While he'd built walls, she'd built communities. The $100 he'd thrown at her, in contempt, had become millions in scholarships and support for others. The ripple effects of her approach were transforming an entire industry. Not everyone appreciated Margaret's approach. Rex Patterson, CEO of Patterson Petroleum, and one of Alex's former allies, launched a hostile takeover attempt of Apex Cross Energy. "Williams is destroying shareholder value with her bleeding heart policies," Patterson declared publicly. "This industry needs ruthless efficiency, not social work." In the emergency board meeting, Alex surprised everyone by becoming Margaret's fiercest defender. "I used to think like Patterson," he said. "It nearly destroyed my company." Margaret's approach isn't just ethical, it's profitable. "Our productivity is up 30%. Turnover is down 50%. We're attracting the best talent, because everyone wants to work for a company that values them." His testimony helped rally the board against the takeover. After defeating Patterson's takeover attempt, Margaret called Alex into her office. "You've proven yourself," she said. "I'm promoting you to President of Operations. You'll be my second in command." Alex was stunned. "After everything I did to you," Margaret smiled, "you've shown that people can change. That's the whole point of second chances. Besides, you know this industry better than almost anyone. I'd be foolish not to use that expertise." The announcement shocked the industry. The man Margaret had dethroned was now her right hand, but it made perfect sense to those who understood her philosophy. Redemption was more powerful than revenge, and former enemies could become the strongest allies when united by shared values. Together, Margaret and Alex led Apex Cross Energy to unprecedented growth. They acquired struggling oil companies and transformed them using Margaret's people-first approach. Within 2 years, they'd become the third largest energy company in Texas. But more importantly, they'd become the most respected, known for treating workers fairly and communities responsibly. At an industry gala, Alex gave a speech that would have been unthinkable years earlier. "Success without conscience is failure," he said. "I learned that from someone I once dismissed as beneath me." Margaret Williams didn't just teach me about business. She taught me about humanity. Every CEO in this room could learn from her example. When oil prices crashed during the global pandemic, many companies collapsed. Apex Cross Energy faced the same pressures, but Margaret's approach paid dividends. Because they'd invested in their workers and communities, they had loyalty that money couldn't buy. Workers accepted temporary pay cuts to keep everyone employed. Communities offered tax breaks to help them survive. Alex worked 18-hour days alongside Margaret, not to maximize profits but to save jobs. 5 years ago, I would have laid off half the company without blinking, he admitted during one late-night strategy session. Now I understand that these aren't just employees. They're families, communities, lives that depend on us. They weathered the crisis without a single layoff. Margaret was named CEO of the Year by Forbes, with a cover story titled "The Waitress Who Bought Her Bully's Company." In the interview, she spoke about transformation, second chances, and the power of dignity. "Alex Cross taught me something important," she said, surprising readers. "He taught me that anyone can change, if given the opportunity and motivation." His transformation from arrogant billionaire to compassionate leader proves that redemption is possible. Alex, reading the article, felt tears in his eyes. After everything, Margaret was giving him credit, sharing her spotlight. He thought back to that night in the diner when he'd told her she'd never amount to anything. How wrong he'd been, and how grateful he was for being wrong. At the company's annual meeting, Alex asked to speak. Standing before thousands of employees and shareholders, he told the full story of that night at Rosie's diner. The room was silent as he described his cruelty, his arrogance, his complete misreading of Margaret's potential. "I stand here today not as your president of operations, but as living proof that Margaret Williams sees potential where others see failure. She could have destroyed me. Instead, she rebuilt me." The confession made national news, becoming a case study in business schools about leadership, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. Margaret typically deflected praise. "Everyone deserves the chance to become their best self," she said. Alex just needed someone to show him who that could be. On the 5th anniversary of the diner incident, Alex announced the creation of the Margaret Williams Scholarship Fund, endowed with $50 million of his personal wealth. It would provide full education funding for service workers pursuing degrees in any field. "I once threw $100 at Margaret as an insult," he said at the announcement. "This is my attempt to transform that insult into opportunity for others." Margaret was moved to tears, one of the few times anyone had seen her emotional in public. "This is how change happens," she said. "Not through revenge or humiliation, but through growth and generosity." Alex has become the man I always suspected was hiding beneath the arrogance. The success of Apex Cross Energy's model began transforming the entire oil industry. Other companies started adopting worker-friendly policies, understanding that Margaret's approach wasn't just ethical but profitable. The Williams method became a Harvard Business School case study, required reading for all energy sector executives. Alex became a sought-after speaker, traveling to conferences to share his transformation story. "I was the worst kind of leader," he would say. "I confused fear with respect, wealth with worth. Margaret Williams taught me that true leadership is about service, not domination. Every arrogant executive needs their own Margaret Williams moment." 3 years after the acquisition, Margaret shocked everyone by proposing a radical restructuring converting Apex Cross Energy into a worker-owned cooperative. Employees would own 51% of the company, with traditional investors holding the remainder. This isn't just about profit sharing, she explained. It's about power sharing. The people who create the wealth should own it. Alex strongly supported the proposal, even though it would dilute his own stake. 5 years ago, I would have called this socialism, he admitted to the board. Now I call it justice. The workers who risk their lives on our platforms deserve more than wages. They deserve ownership. The restructuring passed, making Apex Cross Energy the largest worker-owned company in the energy sector. Rex Patterson's company, which had stuck to traditional ruthless methods, filed for bankruptcy. Patterson came to Margaret and Alex, desperate for help. Margaret agreed to acquire Patterson Petroleum, but with conditions. Patterson would work on the platforms for 6 months, just as Alex had. You need to understand the human cost of your decisions, she told him. Alex took Patterson aside after the meeting. It's humiliating at first, he admitted. But if you're open to it, it's also liberating. I was a smaller man when I had more money. Margaret's gift isn't just saving your company, it's the chance to save yourself. A filmmaker approached Margaret and Alex about documenting their story. The resulting film, From the Ground Up, became a sensation at Sundance. It showed Alex's transformation in brutal honesty. Footage of his early arrogance contrasted with his current humility. Margaret's journey from waitress to CEO was portrayed not as revenge, but as vision. The most powerful moment was when they returned together to Rosie's diner. Alex served coffee to the current staff, while Margaret talked about how that humiliating night had motivated her. Every insult became fuel, she said. But the real victory wasn't buying his company. It was helping him become someone worth respecting. Apex Cross Energy went international, but not in the traditional way. Instead of exploiting developing nations' resources, they partnered with local communities, ensuring that oil wealth benefited the people who lived above it. Their Nigerian operation became a model for ethical extraction, with 50% of profits going directly to local development. Alex led the international expansion, applying lessons learned from his transformation. We're not colonizers, he told his teams. We're partners. Every community we enter should be better for our presence, not despite it. The approach was so successful that the United Nations cited Apex Cross Energy as an example of responsible corporate citizenship. Margaret collapsed during a board meeting, diagnosed with exhaustion and stress-related illness. As she recovered, Alex took over as acting CEO, but his first decision was to visit her in the hospital. Don't you dare undo everything we've built, she warned him, though her smile took the sting out of the words. I'm not the man I was, Alex assured her. You made sure of that. Rest, recover. The company you built is strong enough to run without you for a while, because you built it on principles, not personality. During her recovery, Alex ran the company exactly as Margaret would have, proving that her transformation of him was complete. In a surprise to everyone, Alex and Margaret announced their engagement. It wasn't a romantic comedy ending. Their relationship had evolved slowly from enemy to mentor to partner to something deeper. I fell in love with the man you became, Margaret told him. Not the billionaire, but the human being who learned to see others as equals. Their wedding was held at Rosie's diner, with oil workers and executives mingling as equals. Alex's speech brought tears to many eyes. Margaret Williams saved me from the poverty of arrogance. She showed me that wealth without wisdom is worthless. I once told her she'd never amount to anything. Thank God I was wrong, because she amounted to everything, including the love of my life. Margaret and Alex established Apex Energy University, offering free education to anyone willing to work in the energy sector for 5 years after graduation. The university's motto, "From Service to Success," reflected their shared journey. The first graduating class included children of oil workers. former service industry employees, and even some former executives who wanted to relearn the industry from the ground up. At the graduation ceremony, Alex told the students, "You're entering an industry transformed by one woman's vision." Margaret Williams proved that how you treat people matters more than how much money you make. Take that lesson into the world. Build businesses that elevate everyone, not just the few 10 years after acquiring Cross Energy. Margaret announced her retirement as CEO. She recommended Alex as her successor, shocking those who remembered their history. "Alex Cross is not the man who insulted me in that diner," she told shareholders. "He's become a leader who understands that true success is measured in lives improved, not just profits earned." Alex's first act as the new CEO was to establish the Margaret Williams Day, an annual company holiday where executives worked frontline positions and frontline workers attended leadership seminars. "We must never forget," he said, "that everyone has potential, regardless of their current position." As CEO, Alex implemented Margaret's vision on an even larger scale. Apex Cross Energy became the first major oil company to achieve carbon neutrality, investing heavily in renewable energy while maintaining oil operations. The company's value tripled, proving that ethical business was good business. One evening, Alex found himself training a new employee, a young man named Carlos, who'd been working as a waiter while studying engineering. "Let me tell you a story," Alex said, "about a waitress who changed an entire industry, and the fool who almost missed the lesson she was teaching." Margaret, in retirement, focused on her ultimate project, transforming the entire service industry's relationship with education and advancement. Using her wealth and influence, she created a national program that required companies above a certain size to provide educational opportunities for all employees, regardless of position. Alex testified before Congress in support of Margaret's law, as it became known. "I once believed that some people were destined for greatness and others for servitude," he said. Margaret Williams proved that greatness exists in everyone. It just needs opportunity to flourish. This law isn't about charity. It's about unleashing America's full potential. The Apex model spread worldwide. Companies across industries began adopting Margaret's principles of dignity, development, and shared prosperity. Business schools rewrote their curricula to include courses on transformational leadership based on Margaret and Alex's story. At the World Economic Forum, Alex delivered a keynote that would be remembered for generations. "I stand before you as a reformed corporate terrorist who once believed that crushing others was the path to success. Margaret Williams taught me that lifting others is the only success worth achieving. If she could transform me, imagine what we could do if we all embraced her philosophy." 20 years after that night in Rosie's diner, Margaret and Alex sat in the same booth where it all began. The diner had been preserved as a historical landmark, a symbol of how one moment of cruelty could spark a revolution of kindness. "Did you ever imagine this?" Alex asked, holding Margaret's hand across the table where he'd once humiliated her. Margaret smiled, the same warm smile she'd worn as a waitress, now worn as a billionaire philanthropist who'd transformed an industry. "I imagined proving you wrong," she admitted, "but I never imagined proving you wrong would mean helping you become right. That's the beautiful irony. In trying to show that I was somebody, I ended up showing you that everybody is somebody." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as enemies and became partners in remaking the world, one act of dignity at a time. The coffee was still strong, the vinyl booth still worn, but everything else had changed. And in that change lay the proof that no one is beyond redemption, no position is permanent, and no act of kindness, however small, is ever wasted. That's it for today, family. Tell me, what lesson did you learn from this story? I'd like to know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on your post notification as we share stories like this every week. Until next time, stay blessed.